Good day, grade 11 learners. Welcome to Life Sciences lesson. My name is Ntombi Dladla. This lesson is brought to you by Sci-Bono Discovery Center in collaboration with Gauteng Department of Education. I hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, grade 11s. Today's topic is gaseous exchange, which is the first topic in term 3. So we will be focusing in the requirements for the efficient gaseous exchange. We'll also be looking into human gas exchange. Particularly, we'll be focusing on the structure of the human gas exchange, location, as well as the functions. Now let's quickly look into that. Now, grade 11s, before we can get into the concept of today, I want to remind you that a living cells or all cells in the living body continuously use oxygen in the reactions that result in the release of energy during cellular respiration. At the same time, carbon dioxide is also released. Why? Because accumulation of carbon dioxide will increase the acidity contents in the cells. Now, we can all agree that a living organism or a living cell needs a supply of what? Of oxygen, as well as a constant release of what? Of carbon dioxide. Now, I want us to outline the differences in the following processes. I want us to talk about the differences in the process of breathing, the process of cellular respiration, as well as the process of gaseous exchange. Now, let me start first with the process of breathing. What are we talking about when we talk of breathing? The breathing is a mechanical process which takes in oxygen into the what? Into the lungs. Whereas cellular respiration is a chemical process which takes place in a cell in the release, or so that it can release what? In the cell, so that it can release energy. So the energy is in the form of ATP. Now, the last process that I want us to look into is the gaseous exchange. So what type of a process is a gaseous exchange? A gaseous exchange now is a physical process which involves the exchange of gases between the air as well as the blood in the lungs. So when we talk of the gases, we are simply referring to oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. So this is basically the process of gaseous exchange. I am sure now you are able to distinguish between the processes or the differences in those three processes. The differences in breathing, the differences in cellular respiration, as well as the differences in the gaseous exchange. Now, I want us to look into the ratio of surface area to the volume. What are we referring to now is that all organisms, irrespective of the size, irrespective of whatsoever, from the simple unicellular to the complex multicellular organisms, all these organisms rely on gaseous exchange for what? For survival. Now, what is happening here is that the amount of oxygen taken up and the amount of carbon dioxide released depend on what? They depend on the ratio of surface area to the volume. So, of the organism. It means that it depends on the exchange of gases depends on the ratio of what? Of the surface area over volume. So this gives us the formula of what? Of the ratio of surface area to the volume. Now, I want us to understand what are we talking about exactly when we talk of the surface area. Now, when we talk of the surface area, we are simply meaning the combination, the total combination of all the exposed surfaces of the organism. That is the surface area. So all the exposed surfaces of what? Of the organisms, the combination of all the exposed surfaces of the organisms, that is referred to as what? As the surface area. Where else the volume is the space taken or the space occupied by the same organism. So this space that is occupied by this organism is our volume. The space occupied by this organism is our volume. And then what is the surface area? The surface area is the combination of all the exposed surfaces of the organism. Now, what we need to know under the ratio of surface area to volume is that the surface area to volume will be the total amount of the surface of an organism that has relatively to what? To its size. And what you must also know, grade 11s, is that generally the smaller the organism, if the organism is small, the smaller the organism, the bigger or the larger the surface area. So this is what you must always keep into your mind, that if the organism is small, and then what is going to happen with the surface area to volume, it will always be large. So I want us to look into this example whereby we'll have to do the calculations on the ratio of the surface area to the volume. Now we are having two different organisms here. We are having the small organism here as well as the big or large organism on the other side. Now, when we calculate the surface area, remember the formula, and this will be mastered by learners who are doing mathematical literacy, because this is one of the topics that they are doing. Now, when we calculate the surface area, the formula for the surface area is 6 multiplied by side squared. Excuse my handwriting, is 6 multiplied by side squared. Now, why 6? It is because the surface has how many sides? It has 6 sides. So this will be the first side, second side, third side, fourth side, fifth side, and sixth side. So that's why we are saying 6 multiplied by side squared. So this is the formula to calculate what? The surface area. And then the formula to calculate, or the formula for the volume, when we want to get the volume, we are going to use the formula which says length multiplied by breadth multiplied by width. Or alternatively, you can say side multiplied by side multiplied by side. So these are the two formulae that we will be using when we are calculating, or when we'll be dealing with the ratio of the surface area to the volume. Now, we want now to get the ratio of the surface area for the first organism. Now, let us not erase our formula so that they can guide us on to into getting into the answer. Now we said surface area is 6. We do not erase our 6, so it is 6, which means it's 6 multiplied by side. So what is the length of the side on this first organism? The length is 1. It will be multiplied by 1 centimeter. This is the size of the side. So it will be multiplied by 1 centimeter all squared. So let us not forget 1 multiplied by 1 centimeter all squared. Now 6 multiply 1 squared is 1 centimeter squared. So 6 multiplied by 1, it gives us 6 centimeter squared. So this is how we got into the surface area of 6. Now we need now to calculate the volume. We are referring to the first organism. So we need to calculate the volume of what now? Of the first organism. So we said the volume will be, volume is site times site times site if you don't want to use the length, breadth, and the width weights. So what is this, the measurement of the site? Site is 1 centimeter, so it's going to be 1 centimeter multiplied by 1 centimeter multiplied by 1 centimeter, so it's 111. So what is going to be the answer? 1 times 1 is 1 times 1 is 1 cubic centimeter, because there are 3 sides there. So this is how now we get into to get to the volume of this first organism. So it gives us now what? It gives us the ratio of, remember we have surface area over volume. So what is the value of the surface area? We got our surface area, which is 6, so meaning that we've got 6 over what is the value of the volume? Over 1. So it gives us now the ratio of the surface area of what? Of 1 is to, 6 is to 1. So this is how we got to the surface area volume, the ratio of the surface area volume. Now, if we have now to explain it in relations to what the gaseous exchange, we can say that every 1 centimeter is provided oxygen by 6 centimeters squared of the surface area. Good. So now let us do the calculation on the second organism. So don't forget our formula. For the second organism, we need to find what? The surface area. So we said the surface area is what? Is formula is 6 multiplied by side squared. Now what is, we keep our 6 as is, because this is what we must always multiply with. And then what is the length, or what is the size of the site? The size of the site is 2, so it is going to be multiplied by 2 centimeter all squared. Now we have our 6, 2 squared. What is 2 squared? 2 squared is 4, and then we will be having our centimeter squared. Now 6 multiplied by 4, you know that. Remember, you must always have your calculators in your class or in examination, so that you do not count with your fingers. So 6 multiplied by 4 is what now? 6 multiplied by 4 is 24, and then 24 centimeter squared. So this is our surface area for this organism. Now we need to calculate now what the volume, let me use a different color to calculate a volume. Remember we said volume is site times site times site. So what is the site? What is the site? What is the measurement? What is the length of each site? The length of each site is 2, so it's going to be 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. I know I'm using a long method so that you can understand how did we get to that 8. So 2 times 2 is 4 multiplied by 2. 4 multiplied by 2 is what? Is 8. So you don't say 2 times 2 times 2. You don't say 2 times 2 times 2. It will give you 6 eventually, but you start first with the first 2 numbers. They give you the product, and then you multiply that product with the last value, and then it will give you an 8. Now we are having this the volume of 8 cubic centimeter. So what are we calculating exactly here? Here we are calculating the ratio of the surface area to the volume. So the surface area over volume. What is the surface area? So this is our surface area, which is 24. And then what is the volume? We have just calculated the volume, and then the volume is 8. So grade 11s, we are not going to leave this as it is. We need to write it in a simplest form. So how do we write it in a simplest form? We'll say 8 goes how many times into 24? It's 8, 16, 24. So it goes 3 times, and then 8 goes how many times into 8? It goes once. So it gives us now the ratio of what? Of 3 is to 1 on the second organism. So basically this tells us that for every 1 cubic centimeter on this organism, is provided with oxygen by, is provided oxygen by 3 centimeters squared, which is not sufficient because now the surface area is small. If the surface area is 3, meaning that it is small, and then it is not efficient. So this is how we do the calculations when we do our ratio of the surface area to the volume. Now, I want us to look now into the requirements for the efficient gaseous exchange. The requirements for the efficient gaseous exchange. What is needed so that the gaseous exchange can be effective, can be reliable, or can be possible without any harm. Now, we are going to look into the general requirements, and then we will also look into the reasons why. Now, the first one is that it should be large. The system should be large. Why is the system of the gaseous exchange system should be large? It should be large so that it allows enough oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse. In other words, if the system has the large surface area, it will be possible for what? For the diffusion of oxygen as well as diffusion of what? Of carbon dioxide to take place. That's why the gaseous exchange system needs to be large. The second requirement is that it should be thin and permeable. We know that something that is thin, it is definitely permeable. So why should it be thin and permeable? So that it allows for efficiently and rapidly diffusion of what? Of gases. If the system is thin and permeable, it means that there will be more rapid and efficiently of what? Of diffusion of gases that will take place. Otherwise, if the system is thick, meaning that it is not permeable, so there won't be any diffusion of gases, of maybe oxygen getting in and carbon dioxide getting out. So it needs to be thin and permeable. Now, at the same time, the system should be moist. The system should be moist. So why should it be moist? We know that something that is moist, it's something that is not dry. So it needs to be moist so that oxygen and carbon dioxide can dissolve in water for the process of diffusion to take place. If it is dry, is not moist, it means that our oxygen, our carbon dioxide, or these two gases will not be able to dissolve because there's no moisture, there's no water. And if there's no moisture or there's no water, meaning that there won't be any diffusion of what? Of gases. So it definitely needs to be moist. And then the other requirement is that it should be protected. Protection is very, very, very important. Why the system should be protected? Why the gaseous exchange, the gaseous exchange system needs to be protected? It needs to be protected from any mechanical injuries, and it is also need to be protected from drying out or desiccation. Remember, when we talk of desiccation, we are simply meaning drying out. So it needs to be protected, because if the system is protected, there won't be any mechanical injuries and there won't be any drying out of the system. So that's why it needs protection. And then it must have well ventilation. It needs to be well ventilated. Why does it need to be having a well ventilation? Why well ventilated? That will ensure that the air that is rich in oxygen for all the terrestrial organisms, all the organisms which are found on land, they must get that air which is highly rich with what? With oxygen. And the water must also be rich with what? With oxygen for the aquatic organisms. We know that when we talk of aquatic organisms, we are simply talking about organisms which are adapted to live in water. So enough ventilation is needed so that there's enough oxygen in the air for the terrestrial organism, and there's enough oxygen in the water for all aquatic organisms. And then lastly, the last the last requirement is vascular. It is that the systems should be vascular. Why should they be vascular? So that there will be a transportation of gases to the system and from the gaseous exchange system. So that's why the vascular is needed, so that there will be an effective transportation of of gases into the gaseous exchange system and out of the gaseous exchange system. Now, what we are going to do, we are going to look into the requirements for the effective of gaseous exchange in different organisms now. So we'll start first with the plants. So we are going to look into the requirements for the effective gaseous exchange in the dicotyledonous plants. And then they are the system here is the leaf as well as the spongy mesophyll cells. Now, dicotyledonous plants have a large surface area. Yes, they are large in such a way that they've got the flat surface. So this flat surface increases an exposure to the air. So the surface is large and flat, and then it being flat, it increases the exposure to the to the air. And then is let me erase this one, is the gaseous exchange system of dicotyledonous plants thin and permeable? Yes, it is made up of thin walls, which allows for a rapid diffusion. It is very, very important that we know that the cells are lined with with a thin wall, so that there will be diffusion that is taking place into the cells. And then, is it moist? Yes, the dicotyledonous plants are moist, and then the moisture comes from the water vapor, and then the water vapor passes through the it passes through the stomata, meaning that this water vapor makes the stomata to be to be moist. We know what is water vapor moist. So that water vapor makes it to be moist, meaning that it does comply to the requirement, so that there will be effective gaseous exchange. And then, when we look into ventilation, is it well ventilated? Yes, the dicotyledonous plants are well ventilated because air movement around the leaves. There's air movement around around the whole leaf. If this is our leaf, so there's air movement around the leaf, meaning that there is well ventilation of the leaves. Now, is it protected? Is there any protection there? Yes, the dicotyledonous plants are protected. The leaves are protected with the waxy cuticle. So this is our waxy cuticle. They are protecting the leaf, and then even the lower epidermis. The lower epidermis also protect the leaf, so it is well protected. And then, is there any transportation system? Yes, the transportation system is through diffusion. In other words, diffusion of getting in of of oxygen, and release of of carbon dioxide. So that is how it is having its transport system. Now let's look into the second organism. So we'll be looking into the earthworms. We all know what are the earthworms, and then what are they using for gaseous exchange? They are using the skin. So this is the earthworm. This is the earthworm, which is basically found in soils, mostly in the fertile soils. Now, when we look into the large requirement, does it have a large surface area? Yes, it has a large surface area, and it is elongated and cylindrical in shape. You can see the shape is cylindrical, so it has that cylindrical shape, and it is also elongated. It is long, so meaning that the surface area of the skin is large. And then, when we look into the permeability, is the skin permeable, or is it permeable and thin? Yes, because the body surface is thin, meaning that it is also permeable. So it has a thin and permeable body surface. Now, when we look into the moisture, does the skin have the moisture that is required. Yes, and then what keeps it moist is the mucus gland. The mucus gland keeps the entire body of the worm moist at all time. So it is complying to the moisture. And then when we look into ventilation, is it well ventilated? Ventilation is not necessarily needed in the earthworms. Why? Because the gas exchange takes place on the outside of what? Of the body. So ventilation is not that much important. It is not needed in the what? In the earthworm or on the skin of the earthworm, because the exchange of gases basically takes place on the outside of the what? On the outside of them of the body. And then is it protected? There's no protection. No protection. As you can see, it's not protected by anything, so protection is not needed there. And then the last one, a transport system. Does it have a transport system? Yes, it is through the skin. So this is how the requirements of the earthworms are unfolded. And then when we look into the insect, the example here, we are having the locust. And then what are the gaseous exchange system? They are using the tracheal system. So insects, basically a locust here is using the tracheal system. Now, does it have the large surface area? Yes, it has the extensively branched tracheoles. As you can see, it has branched tracheoles. So it has that extensively branched tracheoles, meaning that it has the large surface area. And then, is it thin and permeable? Yes, when we look into the walls of the tracheoles are very thin, and basically they are permeable. So this allows now the movement of what? Of gases. It allows carbon dioxide, oxygen to get in, as well as carbon dioxide to get out. So this is how it is basically made. So is it moist? Yes, the tracheoles, the walls of the tracheoles are moist. So it is definitely moist. And then when we look into ventilation, does it have a well-ventilated structure? Yes, it has that rhythmic body movements which allow for air to get in and get out of the what? Of the body. And then is it protected? Yes, it is protected by the exoskeleton. So there is protection in the insects. Basically, with this one, we are talking about the locust. And then lastly, transport system. Is it available? Yes, gases are in direct contact with what? With all the tissues. In other words, the gases are in the carbon dioxide as well as oxygen are in direct, oxygen are in direct contact with what? With all the tissues. So there is transport system. And then the other organism is our bony fish. So a bony fish uses gills as a form of a gaseous exchange system. Now, let us look into the first requirement. Does a fish have a large surface area? Yes, it has, because it has a branched gill filaments which increase. It has a branched gill filaments which increases what? The surface area. So it makes the surface area to be big. Those gills filaments, they are increasing what? The surface area of the gaseous exchange in the fishes. And then, do they have thin and permeable walls? Yes, the walls of the gills are thin and they are also permeable. And then what is happening now in terms of moisture? Because fish is an aquatic organism. Basically, it lives in water, meaning that water keeps it moist at all time. So it is moist because of what? Of water, as it is an aquatic organism or aquatic animal. And then, is it well ventilated? Yes. What is happening? Water, which is highly concentrated with oxygen, is taken in through the mouth. And then what is happening? Is taken in through the mouth, and then the very same water will be forced out or out over gills, and then the water that will be forced out will be having what? A high concentration of carbon dioxide, meaning that there is well ventilation. And then when it comes to protection, gills are protected by the bones of the what? Of the fishes, as well as the operculum. And then the last part, transport system in the bony fishes, is the heart as well as the blood vessels. So they've got those two parts. They've got the heart as a transport system, as well as the blood vessels. Now the last organism that we'll look into is the mammals, or are the mammals. Remember that even human beings fall under this category. We are also mammals. Now, what are the gaseous exchange systems for what? For the mammals. Mammals are using what? Are using lungs for gaseous exchange. Now, what is happening? Do mammals have the large system? Yes, they do have a large system. How so? Because mammals have the bronchioles, and then these bronchioles divide to form, let me use a different color, divide now to form a numerous of what we call a numerous of alveoli. So these alveoli, because they are many, they are the ones which are increasing what? The surface area in the mammals. And then at the same time, the very same alveoli are thin. They are lined with a thin squamous epithelium. So they are lined with a thin squamous epithelium, which enables oxygen to get in or to diffuse, and enables carbon dioxide to also diffuse, because the walls or the squamous walls are thin and permeable. So at the same time, the very same alveoli, they've got a thin, the walls are lined with what? With moisture. So they are also moist, and then this moisture allows oxygen as well as carbon dioxide to do what? To dissolve, so that there will be rapid diffusion of these two gases. And then lastly, and then is it well ventilated? Is it well ventilated? Yes, there's well ventilation, because during inhalation and that takes place, ventilation takes place during inhalation as well as exhalation during breathing, meaning that enough air with oxygen is inhaled, and enough air with a lot of carbon dioxide is inhaled. So this is taking place during the process of what? Of breathing. Now, is there any protection in the gaseous exchange of mammals? Yes, the lungs are well protected by what? By the ribs. So there is a huge protection of the lungs. And then lastly, is there any transport system? Yes, the transport system in the mammals is our circulatory system. So basically, these were all requirements for effective gaseous exchange in different organisms. Now, I want us to look into the human gas exchange system. So what is happening? Human gas exchange system is made up of two distinct sections. The first section is air passages together with lungs, and then the last section is our muscles, which are involved in the breathing mechanism or during ventilation. So it is made up of these sections: the air passage, the lungs, as well as the muscles, which are involved in breathing during ventilation. Now, I want us to look into the structure of the human gas exchange system. So it starts at the nasal cavity. So here is our nasal cavity. I'm going to outline the labels, and then we'll discuss their functions immediately after the labels. So we are having the nasal cavity up there, and then it's just inside the nose. And then there is also pharynx. Remember, we once talked about pharynx when we're doing our digestive system. So it is also appearing again in our gaseous exchange system. So here's the pharynx. So this is where the pharynx is situated or located. And then just at the back of the mouth there is epiglottis. We also spoke about epiglottis when we're doing our digestive system. So epiglottis is there at the back of the mouth. And then going down, we are having the larynx, and then the larynx is also known as the voice box. So the larynx is also known as the voice box, and it's mainly visible in males because of the deep voices that they have. So you can see the bump on their neck, that is the larynx. So it's mainly visible in males because of their deep voices. And then when we move down, we have the trachea, and then but here what we see are the C cartilaginous rings. They are the C cartilaginous rings because they are the ones which are protecting the trachea. So what you can feel on your neck are the cartilaginous rings, but behind the rings, that's where you'll get your trachea. And then here we are having the left lung. Okay, before I can go to the left lung, and then going down with the trachea branches into the left bronchus, and then it also branches into the right bronchus. In other words, we'll be having the trachea. This is our trachea, and then it branches now into what? It branches into the left lung, and then this branched part is called the bronchus in singular. And then it also branches into the what? Into the right lung. So the other branch is called bronchus in singular. And then in plural form, we'll be talking of what? Of the bronchi. So one bronchus, many bronchi. So the branch of the trachea, it branches into the left. It branches into the left lung to form the left bronchus. It also branches into the right lung. Remember, we've got two lungs. So it also branches into the right lung to form the right bronchus. And then continuing, we are having the left lung, which is lined by a double membrane, which is called the pleural membrane. At the same time, we are just below the lungs, there's a muscle which is called, or there's a sheath of muscle which is called the diaphragm. So this is our diaphragm. And then going to the other side of the structure, we are having the right lung. So this is the right lung, and then don't forget the right bronchus I've just spoken about. And then these ribs are these lungs are well protected by the ribs. So you can see the ribs there, which are the bones. So this is basically the structure of the human gas exchange. Now I want us now to look into each part and its function. Now we'll start with all the parts of the air passages. So the first part of the air passage is the two nostrils. So the two nostrils, remember the nose has two holes. So those are the nostrils. So what is the main purpose or the main function of the nostrils is to inhale air through the nostrils. So the function of the nostrils is to inhale air, or is to allow air to get into the nostrils. And then the second, we also have two nasal cavities. So remember, the other side of the nose, in the hole there's a nasal cavity, and then on the other side of the hole there's also a nasal cavity. So that's why we are saying there are two nasal cavities. Now what is the function of the nasal cavity? Remember that the nasal cavities are lined with epithelium, and the ciliated epithelium, and they are also lined with the globlet cells. Now the mucus from the globlet cells together with cilia, they trap dirty, or they trap dust and then preventing it from getting into the inner parts of the gaseous exchange, and then they sweep it out. And then when we blow our nose, we blow all the dirty, all the foreign substances which are not needed in our gaseous exchange. And then at the same time, the mucus keeps the cavity moist at all the time. And then remember that because of the blood vessels, the air that is coming in is always warm. So it is because of the blood capillaries. And then the third part of the air passage is the trachea. So this is our trachea. Don't forget the trachea. So the trachea is a windpipe which is situated in front of the esophagus. In other words, this will be the windpipe. It's a it's a windpipe which is situated in front of what? Of esophagus. So this will be our esophagus. It's our esophagus, and then in front of esophagus, that's where we are having the windpipe, which is the trachea. And then remember that the trachea is made up of what? Of C-shaped cartilaginous rings, and then they are protecting the trachea and keeping the trachea open at all times, so that there will be easy movement of what? Of air. In other words, it will allow air to pass through, as it is also referred to as a passage structure or part. And then the other a passage structure or part is our bronchus. Remember I said if it's one is the bronchus, but in plural form we'll be talking of what? Of the bronchi. So we've got the bronchus entering the left lung and the bronchus entering the right lung. So there are two. We'll be talking of the bronchi. So what is happening? The bronchi, remember I said it earlier on, that is the branch of what? Is the branch of the trachea. And then it enters, if this is our right lung, I mean the left lung, and if this is our left lung and this is our right lung. The bronchi enters the upper lobe of the lung. It also enters the upper lobe of what? Of the lung. So in other words, it enters because the lungs are made up of the lobes. The other one is made up of 2 lobes and the other one is made up of 3 lobes. So it enters in the upper lobes of each lung. And what is happening? The bronchus are held open by the O-shaped cartilage rings. There's a difference in regards to the rings. The rings of the trachea are C-shaped. In other words, they are like this. They are C-shaped. But when it comes to the rings of the bronchi, they are O-shaped. So they are also kept opened by the rings of what? The O-shaped rings, and then they are also lined with what? With mucous membrane. In other words, the bronchus is also lined with mucous membrane, making it to be moist at all times. Still continuing with our air passages, we have now bronchioles. Now when we talk of bronchioles, the bronchi further divide to form now the structures which are called the bronchiole. So we've got a bronchus or the bronchi which divides to form a bronchiole. So do you see the difference, grade 11s? The bronchi divides to form the bronchiole. The bronchi was a branch of what? Is a branch of a trachea. Please don't be mind twisted by all of these words. So what is happening now? The bronchiole further divides, the bronchus divides to form the bronchioles. And then these bronchioles do not have any cartilaginous rings in them. Instead, they are smaller and narrower, and they do not have any reinforcements, maybe using the cartilage or whatsoever. They do not have any reinforcement. Now, the very same bronchioles divide now to form the bronchiole. If this is a bronchiole, it divides now to form many alveoli. So they divide to form a collection of alveoli. So these alveoli are referred to as what? As air sacs. So that is the site of what? Of gaseous exchange. So these alveoli are the branch of what? Are the branch of bronchioles. So the bronchiole divided to form a numerous of what? Of alveoli. So these alveoli are the air sacs. In other words, that's where the air is situated, or that is also the site of what? Of gaseous exchange. So many alveoli, because there are many, they are numerous, they are the ones which are increasing the surface area. They are the ones which are increasing the surface area. And then why? So that it maximizes what? The gas exchange. So these are many, and then they are the ones which are increasing the surface area to maximize the gas exchange. And the very same alveoles are having a thin walls of a squamous epithelial. And then why the walls are so thin? To allow a rapid diffusion of what? Of gases. The very same alveoles, they are kept, they've got a fluid which keep them moist at all the time. So they are moist. And then why moist? So that these gases can dissolve in it, so that there will be a rapid diffusion of what? Of gases. At the same time, the very same alveoli are surrounded by a network of blood capillaries. So they are surrounded, as you can see on this one, they are just surrounded by a network of blood capillaries. So that allows diffusion of gases from blood to the alveoli, and from the alveoli to the blood. And then we are now continuing. The second section will be the lungs, and then the lungs as well as the throat. Now, when we look into our structure, up there we are having our pharynx. So the main purpose of pharynx is to connect the nasal cavity with this is the nasal cavity. Let me use a different color. Is to connect a nasal cavity with what? With the larynx. In other words, is the middle part which connects the two parts. And then the very same pharynx is lined with mucus. As you can see, remember, one of the requirements for the effective gaseous exchange is that the system should be moist. So they are also lined with what? With mucus, which keep them moist at all times. And then the very same pharynx leads into the trachea. It leads now into the trachea. Here's the trachea. It leads into the trachea as well as esophagus. And then the second part under the throat and the lungs is our larynx. Remember, I indicated earlier on that the larynx is basically the voice box. So it's the part that contains the vocal cords. It is the part that contains the vocal cords. So what is happening? The air will pass over the cords and it will produce sound. That's why we are able to take out sound, because the air passes through the cords so that we can be able to do what? To take out sound. So that's where the sound is coming from the larynx. And then the epiglottis. So here's our epiglottis. Let me clean the structure. Here is the epiglottis. Remember, is at the back of the mouth and above the what? The larynx. So the epiglottis closes when food is swallowed. In other words, it is closing when food is swallowed. In other words, it directs food into the esophagus. So it closes so that food cannot get into the trachea during swallowing. So that is basically the function of the epiglottis. And now the organs are the lungs. There are two lungs. There's a left lung as well as the right lung. So each lung is spongy and elastic when it comes to the texture. They are spongy and they are elastic, and each lung is lined with a what? With a double membrane. Each lung is lined with a double membrane, which is called the pleural membrane. So the pleural membrane secretes a fluid which acts as a lubricant, and then that fluid helps to prevent friction during breathing. it helps to prevent friction during inhalation as well as exhalation. In other words, because of fluid, there's no friction when we breathe. So we sometimes do not even feel that we are breathing because of the fluid that is secreted by the pleural membrane. And then the last parts of, or the last sections will be the ribs as well as the muscles. Now the ribs, this structure just show us that the ribs are situated on either side of the sternum. So the sternum is this medial bone. So the ribs are on the either side of what? Of the sternum, meaning that they are protecting each lung. They are protecting each lung. They are protecting both the lungs, the left lung as well as the right lung. So they are protecting the lungs from any mechanical injuries. And then the intercostal muscles, when we look into this structure, we can see this is a rib. This is a rib. Remember that ribs are bones. Now, between the ribs, there are muscles which are called the intercostal muscles. So, this one is the external, this muscle is the external intercostal muscle, and then this one is the internal intercostal muscle, and then the last one is the innermost intercostal muscles. In other words, there are 3 different types of what? Of intercostal muscles which are found between the ribs. So meaning that in between there are those between the ribs, there are intercostal muscles. So what is happening? The intercostal muscles contract and relax during breathing, and that alters the volume of air that is getting in the chest, or that is getting in the thoracic cavity. And then the last part is the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm, and then the diaphragm is just a sheath of what? Is a sheath of muscles which are lying below the lungs. So basically the diaphragm contracts, or it becomes a flat during breathing, and then it becomes flat so that it alters the volume again of what? The volume of the chest cavity, so that the breathing mechanism can be made possible. So these were all the structures as well as the functions of the gaseous exchange, human gaseous exchange. Now it's activity time. Okay, grade 11s. The first question, or activity number 1, it's a multiple choice question whereby you need to indicate whether each of the statements in column 1 applies to A only, or to B only, or to both A and B, or none of the items in column 1, in column 2. And you need to write A only, or B only, or both A and B next to the question number. So let's quickly look into the questions now. 3.1, column A, the breathing muscles. Is it intercostal only? Is it diaphragm only? Is it both of them, or is it none? So I'm giving you time to think and to give me the answers. Let's hear. I know there are learners who are with us today. We've got schools which are with us. So I will give you 30 seconds to give me the answer for 3.1. Okay, I do not see, I am unable to see who's in the room and who's not, but not to waste any time. So breathing muscles are both intercostal as well as the diaphragm. So the answer is both A and B. And then question 3.2, the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Is it esophagus only? Is it bronchioles? Is it both A and B, or none? So as I've highlighted earlier on, that I do not see who's in the classroom and who's not. So the answer for 3.2 is the esophagus, because the esophagus is just behind the trachea, and the trachea is the one which is C-shaped, which has the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. And then the structure that prevents food particles from entering lungs. Which structure? Is it epiglottis? Is it glottis? Is it both of them or none? So we've just spoken about this one. Yes, you are correct. It is epiglottis. Moving to activity 2.1, provide names for the following labels. So we've got labels A up to L. So you need to write down the letter and provide the correct label for each letter. So here, A, we know that A is the pharynx, and then B is our epiglottis, and then let me take it in the correct sequence. B is epiglottis, and then C is our trachea, and then what is D? D is the the left lung. What is E? E is the left bronchus, and then what is F? F is our pleural membrane. What is G? Remember, G we said is the diaphragm. And then what is H? H is the right lung. What is I? I is the right bronchus. And then what is J? J is the ribs. And then what is K? K is our larynx. Do not write voice box. So the correct terminology is the larynx. And then what is L? L is our nasal cavity. Let us compare my answers with the marking guideline. Am I correct? Was I correct? Yes. So A was pharynx, and then there's B, epiglottis, trachea, left lung, left bronchus, the pleural membrane, our diaphragm, the right lung, the right bronchus, the ribs, as well as the larynx and the nasal cavity. So I was correct. Yay, I got total for that. I hope you also got total for that. And then question 2.2, give a function of structure B. Where is B? This is B. What is B? We said B is the epiglottis. So what is the function of B? So we just spoken about that B prevents food from entering the trachea during swallowing. What is the function of structure G? What is G? Here is G. What is the function of structure G? Is the diaphragm. You see, grade 11s, it is very, very important to know all the parts, because if you do not know the labels, if you do not know the parts, it means that you will end up giving us the wrong function. You will end up giving us the wrong answer because of the wrong part, because of the wrong label. So you definitely need to know all the parts of the gaseous exchange by heart. So what is G? We said G is the diaphragm. So what is the function of G? The function of G, it contracts and flattens, altering the volume of chest cavity when breathing. And then 2.4, give a function of structure C. What is C? Here is C. So what is the function? What is C? C is the trachea. So what is the function of trachea? Is the windpipe where air is moved to the lungs and from the lungs. How is L adapted for its function? Where is L? Here is L. What is L, by the way? We said L is the nasal cavity. So how is the nasal cavity adapted for its function? So the nasal cavity are adapted for its function because the loblet cell secrete mucus, and then this together with the ciliated epithelial, they trap dirty or dust and sweep it out of the nose. Secondly, the blood capillaries warm the incoming air. So this is how it is adapted to perform its function. Describe the structure of F. What is F? So this is F. So what is F? F is our pleural membrane. Now you need to describe the structure of F. You describe it, you do not draw it. So when you describe, you tell us that these are the two membranes that cover the lungs. It's a mark. And then they secrete the lubricating fluid, which allows them to move freely against each other during breathing. So these are all the marks that you cannot lose, cannot afford to lose, grade 11s. The other question is 2.7. Write the number and name of the part that contains the vocal cord. Here you must understand the instruction. You must write the number and the name or the letter, because here we are not talking of the numbers, but you must write the letter and the name of the part that contains the vocal cords. So the letter is K and the name is the larynx. So it's K and larynx. Now activity 3.1. Here we are having animal, so there's a missing part. It's animal 1, and here we've got animal 2. The question says, which animal has the highest surface area to volume ratio? For how many marks? Just check the marks. For 5 marks. So you must not give us the answer, say maybe animal 1 or animal 2 and expect to get 5 marks. So you need to do your calculations here on how you got into your choice. Now, which animal? So here we've got what? We've got surface area of 3.5 centimeter and the volume of 7.7. And here we've got the surface area of 6 centimeters squared and the volume of 8 centimeters squared. So what you need to do, you need to do the calculations for animal 1 and do the full calculations on animal 2. Then you'll be able to get what now? The answer. So for animal 1, 3.7, which was the surface area, divided by 7.7, it gave us 0.45. And for animal 2, we have 6 centimeters squared divided by 8 cubic centimeter, and then it gave us 0.75. Now from these calculations, this is the first mark, second mark, first mark, second mark. From here you can be able now to do a conclusion on which animal has the highest surface area to volume ratio. So by looking into the answers of both animals, we can see now that the volume, the highest volume is on animal 2. So the answer is the animal 2 has the highest surface area to volume ratio. So because we did our calculations, so we got that 0.75. So the last mark will be on what? On your choice, the animal 2. So this is how you get to your 5 marks, grade 11s. Remember, we still have animal 1 and animal 2. And then in which animal will oxygen reach all cells through the process of diffusion? Between the two animals, between this animal and that animal, which animal will in which animal will oxygen reach all the cells through the process of diffusion? Obviously the one which has the highest ratio, which is animal 2. Give a reason for your answer. Already I've led you. So the reason for that, it is because it has the highest surface area to volume ratio. That's why all cells will get what? Enough oxygen. Again, here we've got animal 1, and animal 2, animal 2. What systems are in place for an animal with a small area to volume ratio to ensure that all cells receive oxygen in the shortest possible time? Remember, this is the animal that has what? The small surface area ratio, the small surface area to volume ratio. So what systems are in place for this type of animal? such animals have respiratory system, and they also have what? The circulatory system. So meaning that these two systems will make sure that all cells are receiving oxygen in the shortest possible time. Again, animal 1 and animal 2. Predict what will happen if an animal with a small surface to volume ratio does not have those systems that we just spoke about. If it does not have the respiratory system as well as circulatory system, so what will happen to such animal if they do not have the specialized system in place for oxygen to reach the cells? So this is an obvious case. It means that a cell will not receive oxygen, or a cell will not receive sufficient oxygen. Therefore, this may lead to death. They might die. That is as simple as that. The last question, name 4 structural requirements of an efficient gaseous exchange surface. So for 4 marks, remember we've got more than 4. So any one out of these, it should be large, it should be thin and permeable. Please do not separate the two. If it's thin, basically it will be permeable. So don't just say thin and then you make permeable the alternative answer. It should be thin and permeable. So do not separate the two things. If it's thin, it is permeable. So it's large, thin and permeable, or it is moist, or it is vascular, or it should be protected, or it should be well ventilated. So how many are the requirements? That they are 6, but the question needs you to give us only one. You see, the question says name. They do not want you to explain. So if you explain, you will say it is large, so that there's what? It is thin and permeable because of what? So the question does not want you to do what? To explain. It needs you to name. So you have named all the 6, but you only need 4. It's okay, but you need to know all of them by heart. So grade 11s, this takes us to the end of our session, or to the end of our lesson for today. I hope you have enjoyed it and you'll be able to answer all the questions based on the gaseous exchange requirements, as well as the human gaseous exchange structure, as well as the functions. Until we meet in our next lesson, enjoy your schooling. Have a great day. Bye-bye.